We have done different iterations of it, but ultimately this is 16 things that are going to be not the absolute greatest about Fort Collins, that really no one is going to tell you if they are bragging about how good of a city they live in. Hey, I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. Best town in the USA, best city to live in, time and time again. But here are 16 things. Now, my name is Patrick Soukup, and this is the Living in Fort Collins YouTube channel, and we are licensed real estate agents in the state of Colorado. So if you're considering a move to the area, even after watching this video, give my team and I a call, text, or email, and we'd love to be an asset on your team. Now, without any further delay, let's jump into these 16 things that no one is just going to volunteer about their beloved Fort Collins, Colorado. Let's go. The weather. Now, Colorado in general, the weather will be variable day to day, hour to hour. It could be sunny one day or sunny 1 hour and thunderstorm, hailing the next. It could be snowing, blizzard in the morning, and sunny and clear skies in the afternoon. We've got wind, we've got rain, we've got all 4 seasons. The weather is dramatic and it will change from hour to hour. Now, we did have one tornado in Windsor in 2008 or so. We do have hailstorms, no hurricane flooding. We can have like floods like the 2013 flood, 1997 flood. Mostly basements are going to be impacted during that, but our weather variability can have an impact on your bike ride, maybe to work and then back home might be a completely different climate. And additionally, it can snow as early as September 8th and as late as June. The rule of thumb is don't plant your garden until after Mother's Day, but we can get a little curveball here and there. So the weather in Fort Collins can definitely vary from hour to hour, day to day. Allergies, and this one hits home for me. I remember when I was 17 or 18 years old, well, I must have been 18 years old, and I was going to our senior party, graduation parties, and I had to go home because my eyes were swollen shut from the allergies that I was having. I grew up and actually had to get allergy shots once a week, and to this day, I still take Claritin D every now and again. Not nearly as bad as I used to have, but we have high, tall grasses, weeds, and pollens in the air. So if moving to the area, we are also a dry climate. So if you're moving to the area, there could be some sensitivities. Now, not nearly as bad as when I went to Oregon. Now, again, different areas, different allergies for different people. But I remember going to Oregon and it was rainy and overcast. And then the next day, the sun came out and everything bloomed and the pollen was, and I was there with 2 of my best friends, and I literally just sat in the house and I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm in hell. So anyways, allergies can have an impact for you here in Fort Collins in northern Colorado. Thin air, our altitude, we're 5,000 plus feet as far as elevation in Fort Collins, and people coming from Tampa Bay or Texas, Arizona, California, wherever, where your elevation's a whole lot lower, well, you can get here and be short of breath and actually have headaches as well. So make sure if you do come here just to visit, get yourself some water. We've got in-laws that'll come here and literally the next day they seem to always forget to drink their water, and the next day they got kind of a scorching headache. We've had clients who have bought ranch style houses because they don't like to walk upstairs even after a year or 2 of being here. So we do have some thin air and a higher elevation here in Fort Collins. The train noise here in Fort Collins, yes, we have trains. We've got trains going along Mason, along Vine, over by Timberline. We don't necessarily have any quiet zones in the area, but we do have kind of buffering gaps where it's kind of more commercial along most of those lines, and it does only sound at intersections. But I would say more than the noise is kind of the traffic. We've dealt with that traffic issue at Vine and LeMay, the overpass. We've got another one coming at Vine and Timberline probably in the next decade or so. But if you're going east or west and you live on the west side of Mason and you're having to come east, you could get stuck behind that train and it could be a 5 to 10 minute wait. Or like us, we were coming up south from Mulberry and LeMay, and at Riverside, we got caught behind a train and it just took about 10 minutes. So I would say more frustrating than the noise is the traffic that it can cause from time to time. Bike theft. Now, for being a platinum rated bike community, if you go onto different forums, and actually I just saw a social media post that somebody's bike got stolen. Now, this can lead people to use kind of older, less expensive bikes on their daily commuter. But I would say if you're riding your bike and you're parking it and locking it up in a location that you're gonna not be able to see or be away from for an extended period of time, either A, buy a really nice bike lock, or B, buy a less expensive bike, because it could be an issue, especially around CSU and kind of that populational area where there are more bikes and more opportunities. So bike thieves could see some type of opportunity there. So unfortunately, we do have bike theft here in Fort Collins for being a bike platinum rated community. Number 6, and we've talked about this before, we just have a limited nightlife. Essentially on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, the city goes to sleep at 8 o'clock. Thursday, Friday night, Saturday night, you can absolutely get out there and have some beverages till a little bit later in the evening, but there's not gonna be a huge energy center, and you're limited on some of your options. You're gonna go to the same watering hole on a weekly basis. There's not gonna be a huge difference of options. Now, you could go explore the Hearth in Windsor, you could go explore the south side of Fort Collins at La Buena Vida, you could go Cafe Vino. So there are some differing options that come into play, but ultimately, if you're here long enough, you're gonna kind of have a limited rotation of nightlife. And also it's gonna be limited to that Thursday, Friday, Saturday night if you're wanting to stay out past 9 o'clock or any significant amount of time. Number 7, Fort Collins is a desirable place to live, and City of Fort Collins, we're trying to figure out how to provide affordable housing, both on the rental side and the purchase side. But the reality is there's fewer homes than there are people who want to live here, which just essentially drives demand, suppliers low, so prices increasing both on the rental side and on the purchase side. So I would say overall, it is a competitive real estate market here in Fort Collins, and prices do seem to continue to increase, making it more difficult to enter into a market, especially for first-time home buyers if they don't have any equity to parlay from the previous house. And rents, the delta between purchase and renting is going to see an increase, and we are seeing significant increases in rental rates versus mortgages. So unfortunately, the housing costs aren't seeing any significant decrease in burden. That is one thing that is a challenge to Fort Collins and Northern Colorado. Colorado State University, with a population enrollment of 34,000 people. We've got employment there of 7,000 plus, so about 41,000 people of our 180,000 people in Fort Collins. So just under 25% of the population is dictated by Colorado State University. So you can imagine the type of impact that has on our economy, on our traffic, and on housing as well. So there are seasonality shifts that really dictate when CSU is in session versus when it's out. In Fort Collins, during the summer months, you can really feel a dramatic decrease of traffic, especially along College Avenue, right when you get near CSU. And when the kids get back, especially during homecoming, downtown's gonna be busy, traffic's gonna be a little bit worse, and make sure that on their first snow of every year that you stay off those streets as much as you can, especially near CSU, because a lot of those first-time snow drivers that are coming from California or Arizona are on the roads, and they always seem to be in a hurry. Water restrictions, number 9. Now, we haven't necessarily had much of these over the last few years, but we have drought seasons, and one of the first things that's gonna happen is limitations on watering your lawn. Okay, yes, I get it. People don't necessarily love the idea of putting water on turf that isn't even natural to the area. I get it, but it is beautiful. Houses with grass are gorgeous. One of my favorite parts of going through a new construction process is one of the last steps, and that's when they put the sod in. When the sod goes in front of the house, it really just turns the house into a home. At least that's how I feel. Now, there's a lot of xeriscape that's going on and a lot of incentive programs through the city of Fort Collins that you could actually get credits if you go xeriscape or have minimal sod or watering. But there are water restrictions during those drought years, and we are a dry, arid climate, a desert really. So the reality is we can have dry seasons, and water restrictions could become a thing, and that lovely lawn that you just poured in money and water and all that good stuff could die relatively quickly. Not that I've seen, but it could, especially if water restrictions get pretty serious. Transient population, but not the transients that we talk about typically. The folks that come in kind of vagabonds, gypsies type deal, not necessarily those. But I would say between CSU and the amount of people who now call Fort Collins or have a home here in Fort Collins that don't call it their primary residence is increasing. So there are people who are coming in and out. It isn't necessarily that same tight-knit community that Fort Collins once was. And what I mean by that is, well, when I was growing up, really, even my last name was one of those things that a lot of people knew. One of my uncles had gone to school with them and were friends and all that good stuff. Well, now there's a lot of there's been a lot of growth since that time. And while there's still those original Fort Collins folks that still are really pretty tight, close knit, there are so many others. And I would say the growth of Fort Collins being a destination place, second homes, the university, there is a lot of more transient population who might call this home for 6 months, 2 months, 3 months, 9 months, but not necessarily their primary residence forever, which isn't amazing for community building, but there are still plenty of people, myself, tons of friends, tons of people who do call this their primary home, primary residence, and their lifelong home. Which talks to you about the growing population. We talked a little bit earlier about the demand, the people that are moving here. We have 180,000 people. Our growth management area is suggested to be 250,000 people. Northern Colorado in general, we're really right around 750,000 people between Weld County and Larimer County, with expectations to exceed 1 million people over the next 20 to 30 years. So the growth of Northern Colorado is not necessarily going to slow down. We are seeing communities like Timnath, Windsor, Severance explode in population, Berthoud, Johnstown, and areas like Fort Collins, Loveland, and Greeley growing a little bit slower, but still absolutely growing. So if you're looking to move to an area that is really just kind of stagnant and maybe like, hey, we're moving to an area that had its growth and no longer happening, Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, and along the Front Range really is not going to be that option. We did a video on this. Number 12, limited public transportation. We're trying, but there was a conversation that we had with a city planner who suggested that what used to happen is like New York. They built the train system and then the housing was built around that. They said, if we build it, they will come. Kind of Field of Dreams-esque. Fort Collins is kind of going the opposite route. A lot of communities have done this where there are already houses and people who need the public transportation, but now we're trying to build it. We have the obstacles of easements and streets and stop signs and not necessarily a program built around the public transportation, but a transportation trying to get to where the population is. And our public transportation is trying to do better. We're trying to increase ridership. We will have bus systems now with our new budget in place on Sundays and holidays. So 7 days a week, which is awesome. We're building out a $100 million facility on the Elizabeth Street, which will be a bus rapid transit system. And eventually we're supposed to build one on Harmony Road. We've got one along Mason, which is pretty awesome, but we do have limited public transportation and not the best system by any means. I was just talking about droughts and possible water restrictions. Well, we still have some bodies of water and we do have mosquitoes here. Now, it's not too bad. I went to Naples, Florida, and it felt like I was in 90 degrees with 60+% humidity or worse, wearing long sleeves and pants because, well, I was getting eaten alive by the state bird, which is the mosquito. It is not nearly as bad here, but I will say dusk and dawn, walking around the parks, with our kiddos being as young as they are, it's definitely something that we aren't like overly concerned about, but not necessarily something that we don't think about at all. So I would say moving to the area, around bodies of water, standing bodies, parks, ponds, lakes, there are going to be mosquitoes. So it's something that you do need to think about if you're sensitive to or don't want to be around that at all. Number 14. Now, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but we do have 4 distinct seasons in Fort Collins, and probably one of the least desirable things in my career, because I do own rental properties across Northern Colorado, is hailstorms. It'll happen in a flash. It could be an ominous orange type looking sky, and then all of a sudden, boom, you are hit. And it could be little pea gravel-sized hail, or honestly, it could be golf ball-sized hail. Out on the eastern plains where weather is a much, much more severe, killing livestock and ravaging vegetation and crops, we don't necessarily have that here. We do have the protection kind of along that hill, that front range. It kind of jumps us a little bit out to the eastern plains, but we can have hailstorms and they can hit anywhere. In fact, we were working with a client and we had our inspector up on the roof and they said, it looks like there's hail damage. And I was like, is there a hailstorm here? And sure enough, they had the adjuster out and there was a hailstorm in July of 2022. And it showed that, and it kind of reaffirmed, I should say, that hailstorms could absolutely hit one side of the street and not the other. But hailstorms in Fort Collins and northern Colorado are a real deal. It's something that you want to park your car in your garage. It's not the funnest by any means. We do have insurance to protect that, but insurance rates are ticking up because of the claims that we've had on roofs and vehicles, all that kind of stuff. And like anywhere across the United States, insurance just seems to be increasing. At least we still have insurance options here, but hailstorms in northern Colorado are a real thing. Our last two, and I'm excited for our last two. We have speed traps galore here in Fort Collins. Specifically, we have 6 red light cameras that were originally only taking pictures and giving tickets, just financial tickets, if you crossed a red light. Well, the state of Colorado changed its rules, allowing for these red light cameras to now be speeding options. And there's an intersection in Fort Collins, Prospect and Shields, that had 16,000 people going 10 or more miles, I think it's 11 or more miles over the speed limit in 1 month. It's projected to raise revenues in Fort Collins by millions of dollars. Now it's like from like $1 to $4 million. So nothing like too crazy, but pretty significant. And there are 2 different speed vans in Fort Collins. And then there is going to be 2 other what's called AVA systems, automated vehicle identification systems. And they're going to be speeding corridors and they're gonna move on a monthly basis. And so in Fort Collins, which ultimately I can tell you the reasoning why we're doing this is so that we slow down. We have a vision 0 in Fort Collins, 0 fatalities or serious injuries on our roadways. And so there's reasonings we do this, but it can be very frustrating if you get one of those tickets. I will say, I've probably gotten a handful of red light tickets. I've probably gotten 2 or 3 speeding van tickets where they just go and you're like, what's that? Oh, too late. Our au pair has gotten a speeding ticket from that van. And so I will say it's not any fun when that happens, but the reality and the theory behind it is good and I get it. But coming here, you're gonna get dinged. Might hit that pocketbook if you can't stop speeding or passing those red lights. And our last one. And when I was writing this out, I just wrote, we paint shit. And I was like, you know, it's kind of interesting because I was watching our City of Fort Collins government, and one of the things, you know, it's a $650 million budget here in Fort Collins and for the City of Fort Collins. And one of the things that we were discussing is our street painting, street art, asphalt art installations. $60,000 or so is what was at stake. And the conversation was, should we have 4 installations or 2? And the reality is it's a great thing that Fort Collins is having that conversation of having additional discretionary funds and beautifying the community. But we have streets that are painted. We have electrical box that are painted. We have pianos around town that are painted. And Fort Collins is a very music, culture oriented location, and it does make things very special. But I will say that the City of Fort Collins was discussing budget items and what to cut. And one of those was asphalt art in way of, should we give more money to affordable housing or homelessness programs? And so that was kind of the low hanging fruit. But yes, things that people don't tell you about Fort Collins is one of the things that the city council is arguing about is, should we have 2 installations or 4 installations or no installations? And those are conversations that are happening at the City of Fort Collins. Now, the reality is I love the electrical boxes. Over 400 electrical boxes in Fort Collins painted. The pianos around town that are painted are awesome. And the street art, it's cool. I'm not a big fan. I don't feel like it can last too long, but I guess we will see. So there you have it. If you are talking to somebody who just raves about Fort Collins, bring up these 16 issues and see what they have to say. I think they're serious things to talk about and to consider, and hear what other local or people who have lived in the area or living in the area, their perspectives are. Is it a nothing burger, or is it something that really is impacting their lives, or would they wish they would have moved elsewhere? My name is Patrick, and this is the Living in Fort Collins YouTube channel. I appreciate you guys watching. If you guys haven't liked this video, please like it. And if you haven't subscribed, I would appreciate you subscribing. Until next time, take care.